What y'all listening to?
Limelight Highlight Podcast.
Welcome back to the show where we highlight positive stories, individuals, groups, and organizations and bring them into the limelight for a positively positive podcast. I know it's a mouthful, but that is the new intro. And as always, I am your host, Jonathan Rosario. And I got a lot of good feedback from not last week's episode, but the week before. So big thank you once again to Perry and the supporters who listened, and also all the people who make those things possible. Just gonna jump right into it. This week's unrelated fun fact goes out to today's parents. Hey parents, you ever get tired of your kids annoying you, or you ever just want some alone time, or you need some time with your significant other? Well, imagine not having a car to go and drop your kids off at your grandparents' house. And now imagine living in 1913, where a lot of people didn't even have cars. Well, here goes your unrelated fun fact for this week. Until 1915, in the U.S., parents could legally mail their children through the postal service. Back in 1913, when young parents wanted to get some time for themselves and send their kids to their grandparents, there was a much easier, cheaper, and more effective way of traveling rather than traveling all the way themselves with children. The time-saving shortcut was simple. They'd mail their child. Back in those days, it was actually legal, and I can't even imagine just giving your kid off to, I guess at the time it wouldn't be a stranger, but still, the mailman? People were way too trusting back then, but hey, how times have changed. So back to the show. As I said last week's, once again, I keep saying last week. It's been 2 weeks. Sorry. There's going to be a lot of changes and things that I'll be mixing up this year with the podcast. And here's one of those changes and why I keep referring to last week. In the beginning of each month, the first week of each month, I plan on doing a Things to Come episode. So, I'm also working on themes for each month. And this is kind of hard for me since I love talking about any and everything as far as topics go. So I'll be restricting myself just a little bit, but I think it'll help. Honestly, I think it'll help me grow. And it'll be a good way of highlighting some particular subjects for the entire month that I think need to be highlighted. So this way I can see what my audience is really into, so I can focus more on appealing to you, the listeners. And since it is now February and I missed out on putting a show the first week of the month, this episode is going to be a treat. We have a packed month full of knowledgeable and positive guests that'll be featured on the show. It's all about Black History Month and the people who are doing positive things. The next episodes will feature, this one is going to feature a teacher. Our next one is going to feature an activist. Another one is going to be a musician and somebody doing positive things. Just overall, all around positive people doing positive things, focused on the Black community in honor of February being Black History Month. So I look forward to these next few episodes, and I hope you do as well. This is going to be one of the few changes that I will be implementing. And with that being said, today we have Lorri Holloman as our guest. She comes from a very diverse background, from climbing the ranks of the highest positions in marketing for some very well-known companies, to completely changing careers, to becoming a teacher and venturing off into soon creating her own, or actually she already created, but getting and diving deeper into the family-owned business. We talk about her upbringing, how the social climate has changed, and even mention some lesser known historical figures in Black history that need to be highlighted. So she was a treat. She was a real treat to talk with, and I highly recommend you pay attention and get inspired, because if you get anything out of this conversation, it is to follow your heart, find fulfillment in whatever it is that you're doing. And so I won't give any more spoilers away from this episode. So without further ado, welcome Lorri to the podcast. Alrighty. So welcome Lorri to the podcast.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Yeah, I got in touch with you from your niece, Kira.
Yes.
And she filled me in on all the things that you do, and you kind of gave me a little background information on yourself as well. Mm-hmm. You're a mother of two, a teacher, a runner, a business owner, someone who's interested in history, traveling, and learning about other cultures.
Yes.
A very busy woman, to say the least.
Yes. They say Beyonce has 24 hours a day. So look, I'm trying to catch up with her.
There you go. And she's very successful. So
yes.
Let's go down the list. And if you can, tell us just a little bit more in depth about yourself and how you got to be a woman who wears so many hats.
Well, my name is Lorri Holloman. Again, I'm 51 years old, and I am definitely a lover of life. I have been through some tough times growing up in my childhood in Chicago, but I have persevered through those challenges. And I believe that that background has made me the person that I am today, exactly where I want to be. As far as goals and objectives, and if there's a new goal or a new task, I can definitely achieve and exceed that in most cases because I have a lot of tenacity coming through, being raised by a single mother in urban communities such as Chicago, the South Side of Chicago, and then transitioning and moving to California in the 80s at the height of drug and gang warfare in the 80s. So that was definitely a eye opener. And I grew up in Koreatown, actually in Los Angeles, which was a culture shock for me because coming from Chicago, it is very segregated. A lot of people don't realize that, but it is. And so when I moved to Los Angeles, which is a plethora of cultures, it was a culture shock to me, actually, because I had only went to school with people that looked like me. I only lived around people that looked like me. We shopped at people that shopped with people that looked like me. So moving to California was a completely different mindset, and it was an adjustment for me. I moved to Koreatown, where it was majority Korean and Hispanic people. I didn't speak the language, so that
Right.
definitely, and I stood out because I'm Black. But I actually fostered amazing relationships with Hispanic friends as well as Korean friends. And so I'm so grateful for that experience because a lot of people don't get to experience that. So I'm definitely a lover of people and culture.
Nice. It's funny you say that because it reminds me of a good friend of mine, my buddy Zeke. He grew up in Houston, Texas,
Mm-hmm.
predominantly Black neighborhood. Grew up with everybody who looked like him. Went to school. His whole world was just, the Black.
His culture.
Yeah, his culture. And I remember talking to him, and he joined the military, but he told me, I think after he got out of high school or went into high school, up until that point, he thought Black people were the majority. That's
Because
how,
of his environment.
exactly. That's how secluded he was in his environment. So I just thought that was like, wow, like, you don't hear
Yes.
about things like that. So,
Yes.
but, so how did you get into marketing, as far as you moving to LA and then, and learning that culture shock and getting into all of that?
Well, that was definitely a transition. I always wanted to work in the entertainment business. I wanted to be a electrical engineer. No, I'm sorry, a recording engineer. So my oldest brother, my niece's dad, Kira's dad, he was a musician like all his life. He went to school, he went to college and studied music theory. He had a reggae band that was popular in Chicago for many years. If any of your viewers or listeners actually saw the movie Love Jones, the scene where the couple went to the reggae club for their date. That is where my brother played for many years. He was the house band there.
Very cool.
So so I was inspired by him. And I still love music today. So I wanted to be a recording engineer. And when I decided to go to college, I actually majored in communication. So I was actually a DJ in college for a small amount of time. It's weird because I'm not a shy person, but for some reason with working on the radio station, I was a little bit shy. So when people would catch me in the yard and like, hey, wait a minute, didn't I hear you on the radio this afternoon? I'm like, no, wasn't me, somebody else. So
Try to keep it private.
right. So I wanted to kind of pursue that avenue. So when I came home from school, I actually found an ad in the paper and I was like, hey, do you want to work in television? I'm like, yes. So I applied, I go down to the interview. No idea. It was a television rep firm. And what that is that it's a representative. They represent TV stations. So it was all sales based. Well, I started on as a mail clerk. Well, I was so happy to get a job. I didn't care. I just started as a mail clerk.
Work from the bottom up.
Right. So fast forward 2 years into it, I actually got an opportunity to be a assistant media buyer. So what media buyers do, they buy advertising time for advertisers on TV, radio, outdoor, print. So the full gamut. So I got an opportunity that came up for me to do that. So I was like, oh yeah, that's cool. So I worked my way up all the way up to director level. Now, I lived in Los Angeles and I also lived here in Vegas doing the same thing. So I've worked on accounts such as McDonald's, Baskin Robbins, Burger King, Procter and Gamble, Las Vegas Convention and Visitors Authority, Nevada Energy. So did the full gamut, and also ended up buying media in Canada, in Western Canada. So that was a learning curve for me as well, because the metrics are different.
Yeah.
The currency is different. So I had to learn all of that information, but I did it for 4 years and it was a great experience. So I was so happy to be able to have that opportunity to do that, because a lot of people don't. And in the advertising world, it's not a lot of people of color either there.
I can imagine. So you're basically at one point were responsible for getting commercials on TV and whatever other marketing genres are out there.
Yes, I would have to negotiate. And that is that's kind of my jam. I love the art of negotiation. So definitely I would have to negotiate with TV stations, and we're talking general managers of TV stations. I would manage anywhere up to $10 million a year in ad revenue for various clients.
And how are you perceived, or how are you taken when it came to doing those things and not a lot of people who look like you are in that?
Well, fortunately, when you get to higher level, in some cases, for instance, in this industry, people, once you get to a certain level and you're managing that type of money, I was well respected, and people looked at me as, oh, okay, I have to play her game because she's the one who controls the purse strings. So from that perspective, it was very positive. And actually, even though I've been away from the industry now, 11 years, it's been 11 years. If anyone were to follow my personal page on Facebook, I'm still good friends with a lot of those people that I did business with for, you're talking 30 years.
You made some really good relationships then.
Yep.
Nice.
So, and some of it wasn't easy. I mean, because at the end of the day, I had to negotiate what was best for the client. So, but, and with that, and people like my friends who weren't in my field, they saw the perks, and they're like, oh, Lori's going to Super Bowl. She's going to Laker games, or she's going to Dodger games, or she's going to, see Bon Jovi, all kind of, plethora. I've seen so many artists and been to so many things that people dream about going. But again, that was attached to the job because I had the purse strings. So
it wasn't all pleasure.
Right. And, I remember flying up to San Francisco one day. I left the office early at 3:00 and jammed to LAX to go to a Giants game. CBS station invited me up to come. And of course, I'm leaving sunny Southern California, and I go up because I have on a short sleeve shirt. I'm leaving from work and it's freezing. And so the station manager was like, oh, do you want me to buy you a sweatshirt? Now, granted, yes, it's his money, but I didn't say yes. I'm like, no, $50, that's too much for a sweatshirt. Yeah. That's ridiculous, because I wouldn't buy it. But then he kept talking to me. He said, you need it. You're freezing. So if you ever been to that ballpark up in San Francisco, it's right by the water and it is cold. So I ended up getting the sweatshirt, but I gave it to my brother because I'm not into San Francisco Giants.
Gotcha. So how was that transition? So you said you've been out of that field for about 11 years now. So what did you do from marketing to as soon as you got out of there, and why did you leave?
Well, I had pretty much hit the level of director level on the media agency side. And I wasn't challenged anymore. I was bored. And so I said, you know what, I want to go into sales. Well, nobody will hire me in sales because they love working with me as a client, because I would, make sure that they got the best, share of money. So finally, a radio station gave me